Hello friends, welcome back. Let us continue with the discussion. In our previous lecture, I talked about the structural dynamics of the group. In continuation of the same discussion, we will start with another structural property of group, that is cohesiveness, which is completely psychological in nature and plays very important role in making the group highly functional. Cohesiveness is the strength of the group members' desire to remain as part of their group. When any individual who relates with the group's functioning or the group's performance, he has a high desire to remain and continue the membership of the group in long run. So, this is an individual's desire to satisfy his sense of belongingness to an extremely successful group. So, if the group becomes highly cohesive based on the success, the members are attracted to each other and accept group goals and help work towards meeting them. So, whenever the members of the group become highly cohesive or they become very proximal or close to each other, they are attracted to each other, they accept the group norms as they are defined and tend to work together in order to achieve the common goal. So, we can say in essence that cohesiveness refers to a we feeling. It is about esprit de corps, a sense of belongingness to a group. So, this is about feeling of we, sense of belongingness or sense of togetherness that any individual can have that feel when he or she becomes a part of that group. So, there are several factors that to what extent an individual wants to be the member of the group and becomes highly cohesive. That means, the member has a desire to stick together with the other group members. So, there are certain reasons. For example, one such factor involves the severity of initiation into the group. So, research has shown that the greater the difficulty people overcome to become a member of the group, the more cohesive the group will be. If the group is highly successful and the entry in that group is very difficult, so whosoever is the member of the group, they will understand the importance of the membership of that particular group and they will try to remain close to each other with this idea that we should not leave the membership of this group or we should not lose the membership of this group. So, no matter the entry is difficult in any group, the members tend to become highly cohesiveness. So, the rigorous requirement for gaining entry into elite groups such as the most prestigious medical schools or military training schools, their members themselves feel responsible to maintain their membership within that group and tend to align with the group norms in a very stringent fashion. No matter how much effort they have put in to become the member of the group, but since they understand the essence or the prestige of that group, they would make all the efforts not to lose the membership of that particular group. The other reason that why a group becomes highly cohesive is that whenever an individual experiences some external threats and dangers or any tough competition, he needs that support. So, one person cannot do all. So, he needs support from the other members. So, ultimately in order to have that security and support from the members, definitely the person tends to become very cohesive towards the other group members in order to keep himself protected. So, whenever the group face a common enemy, they tend to draw together and that cohesion not only makes workers feel safer and better protected, but also aids them to encourage them to work closely together and to coordinate their efforts towards the common enemy. Another, cohesiveness tends to be greater in smaller groups because generally speaking groups that are too large make it difficult for members to interact and therefore for cohesiveness to reach at higher levels. So, whenever the group is small in size, then the group members become highly cohesive. So, size of the group also plays very important role in order to keep the group structure intact and functional. The more the group members increases, it becomes difficult to maintain interaction and interpersonal relationship with the other group members and ultimately the members become less cohesiveness towards each other. And finally, the reason that why any group becomes cohesive is that nothing succeeds like success. It completely depends on the success history of the group. The more the group is successful, the more the group that honors the existence of the group, the more the group members become cohesive towards each other and everybody loves a winner. So, the success of the group tends to unite the members and they rally around their success. For this reason, employees tend to be loyal to successful companies. So, these are the reasons that why a group becomes highly cohesiveness. So, first is that severity of initiation into the group, that is the entry of the group. The more the entry is tough, the more the members become cohesive as soon as they get the entry into the group. It is about external threats and dangers. To protect themselves from external threats, members tend to work together in order to protect each other from those dangers. The other is that if the size of the group is small, then members tend to be more cohesive. There are more interpersonal relationships and interactions, and the more the group is successful, the more members tend to become cohesive towards that group. Thus, we can say that cohesiveness is a positive attribute of a group, definitely, because people enjoy belonging to highly cohesive groups. Members of closely knit work groups participate more fully in their group's activities. They readily accept the group goals and norms and are less absent from their jobs than members of less cohesive groups, because there is more attraction, there is more interaction, there is more interpersonal relationship that keeps the members working and attracted towards their group goals. And last, that cohesive groups tends to work together quite well, sometimes exceptionally productive and have low levels of voluntary turnover. That means they are more happy to work for the group. But at the same time, since we are completely talking about the positive aspects of a cohesive group, if this exceeds its limit, then cohesiveness can become a problem. For example, if a highly cohesive group's goals are contrary to the organization's goals, that group is in a position to inflict a great deal of harm by working against an organization's interests. So, whenever the group becomes highly cohesive, then it can divide the organization into two. That is organization management on one side and the group members who are highly cohesive on the other side, and that creates a rift, because this creates a conflict of interest and the group members tend to cause harm to the organization to any extent. So, this is one of the disadvantage of being in a very highly cohesive group. So, we can say that cohesiveness is a double edged sword, that its effects can be both helpful and at the same time it can be harmful. Okay. So, this is about the pitchfork results from the Shaster's study, where he has talked about two aspects of a group. He has conducted his experiment in terms of leadership and cohesiveness. He has used this term induction in place of influence or leadership, and how leadership, high or low leadership styles can play an important role to regulate a highly cohesive or low cohesive group in order to reach organizational effectiveness. So, it is found in the group that any group which is highly cohesive and who has experienced high positive leadership or a strong leadership style, then the group is highly productive, which is a most conducive state in any group, that along with positive leadership and high cohesion will lead to positive organizational outcome. Whereas, in comparison, that any group which is very low in cohesion and at the same time the leadership style is also very low, then the performance of the group on the overall as well as the leader and the members will also go down and can hamper the performance of the organization. So, according to Shaster's, this is a classic study of pitchfork productivity curves. High level of cohesiveness and positive or strong leadership will lead to organizational performance to a heightened state, and if the cohesion is low and the leadership also is weak, then it reduces the performance of the organization. But definitely it is expected that if any group which is highly cohesive with strong leadership style, then there can also be a state of independency when group members become independent of their own and they perform their task in their own discretionary manner. So, this is just a snapshot cohesion, to understand the process of cohesion in organization, that how whether it is high or low cohesiveness among members, how that state of cohesiveness should be dealt with appropriate level or style of leadership. That is the essence of Shaster's pitchfork study of productivity curves. So, cohesion with leadership style will define the productivity of the organization. So, the results indicated that highly cohesive groups that is given positive leadership will have the highest possible productivity. This is the most conducive state that can be experienced in any organization. So, a highly cohesive group is analogous to a time bomb in the hands of the management, which can obtain record breaking productivity levels or severely restricting output depending on how it is led. Whereas, a low cohesive groups with poor leadership leads to the lowest levels of productivity and will fall between the two extremes of the cohesive groups. That means, it will lead to the extreme situation with weak leadership and low cohesiveness. So, the implications for management being that a group when well handled is the most valuable productive tool. However, when mishandled, the consequences can be dire. As I mentioned just now, that if cohesiveness is handled in appropriate manner with appropriate leadership style, the results are amazing, and if not, if mishandled, then it leads to dire consequences or negative consequences. All right. This is about what we discussed till now about cohesiveness in terms of high and low. How high and low cohesiveness has to be handled with appropriate leadership style. But what are the consequences of group cohesiveness? When the group becomes extremely cohesive, what kind of behavioral or psychological process takes place in any organization? The first is groupthink. The tendency of members of highly cohesive groups to strongly conform to group decisions, that they fail to think critically that what can be the potential impact on the organization or the outsiders within the group itself, and there is absence of reality testing and moral judgment. So, suppose the members become extremely cohesiveness, maybe they can go against the interest of the management and thinking high about their own decisions without even giving a thought that whatever they have decided can have some dire consequences on the whole organization and can hamper the productivity of that organization or the group. So, groupthink is the extreme consequence of cohesiveness, where there is absence of reality and moral judgment. So, members become so cohesive, close and proximal to each other that they even fail to think that whether the thinking is right or wrong, and they tend to impose their own decision. So, this process is termed as groupthink. This is the consequence of group cohesiveness. But how it can be dealt? It is not that the group has become cohesive and the organization cannot do anything. The management still intervenes in the whole process of groupthink and intervenes in a way in order to critically analyze the decision making of the cohesive group. So, the first technique is devil's advocate technique. This is a decision making technique where an individual in the group is allowed to become a critic in the proposed decision. The decision technique helps prevent groupthink and increases the chance of high quality decision. So, within the group itself, one group is known as a critic who is allowed to think, rethink and perceive the decision from every aspect and prevent the highly cohesive group to take any extreme or risky decision that can negatively impact the whole organization. So, this kind of technique prevent companies from making expensive or risky decisions, promote open inquiry and admit shortcomings. So, this is one remedy of groupthink, that is devil's advocate technique. The other is authentic dissent technique. In this technique, an outside expert is hired who actively disagrees with the decision of the group members and will encourage original thinking and alternative views and attitude changes. So, in the authentic dissent technique, the third person who is an expertise in decision making and will try to intervene in the decision making of the cohesive members and will encourage members to rethink or foster original thinking in order to find solution to the problem that what it can impact in many ways. So, in devil's advocate technique, the one member of the group will become the critic, and in the authentic dissent technique, the third person is an expert, maybe he is an outside expert and he will intervene in order to analyze or rethink about the decision that has been taken by the group members. So, this is how groupthink is prevented in any decision making process of the organization. The other is group shift. It is another extreme of group thinking, that it is a phenomenon in which the initial positions of individual members of the group are exaggerated toward a more extreme position. So, any individual who is holding a position will be considered perceived to be more at a higher position, and in that thought process people within the group make risky decisions which are different from when they are alone. So, they are being influenced by the other members that I can take some extreme decisions or risky decisions, and ultimately they impose, and the group has to suffer certain losses. The point is that any individual member who has a position, his position will be perceived in a very exaggerated way, and members will try to push his position more to a higher level in order to take extreme decision. So, this is about the group shift. So, in group people are likely to exhibit a slight preference towards the riskier decisions as the risk is divided among the group members rather than borne by an individual. So, the person who is also holding the position, higher position, will also be in a state to take some risky decision because there is no loss, there is no harm, the responsibility will not come onto him. It will, that responsibility will lie on every member's shoulders. So, when you are perceiving any one positions to be higher, then more interdependency develops to take higher decisions. So, this is about group shift, when group members shift from their position to a higher one in order to take risky decisions. So, it is a mode of thinking that people engage in when they are deeply involved in a cohesive group, and when the members are striving for unanimity override their motivation to appraise alternative courses of action in a very realistic manner. So, depending on each other and perceiving one person's position to be at a higher level, they will engage in risky decision making and they will refrain from considering their action or decision to be in a very realistic manner. So, this is group shift. Alright. The other consequence is social loafing and social facilitation. So, these are tendencies that evolve in any group when the group size increases. When group size increases, definitely groupthink also increases, more decision making becomes unrealistic among members because of exaggerated thinking, or it can be about cohesiveness, that they become more cohesive also. But social loafing and facilitation evolves, which is based on the influence of others' presence in an individual's performance, and both are part of group behavior. So, what happens in social loafing? When the group size increases, so people tend to shed off their responsibility onto others. They try to avoid taking up the responsibility and they expect that the other person can do it. So, this is social loafing. It is a tendency of group members to exert less individual effort on the additive task as the size of the group increases. So, additive task means that maybe some extra task has been assigned to one individual apart from his regular job, and people have to make some coordinated efforts in order to finish that task. Once those additive tasks are assigned to them, members will try to shed off their responsibility or their efforts onto other members, and in order to keep themselves free. This is social loafing. This kind of tendency evolves whenever the group size increases. Whereas social facilitation, it is a tendency for the presence of others sometimes to either to enhance the individual performance or impair it. This is a state of emotional arousal. So, whenever we are performing a task, if other members are also there, maybe the other members will either support that person to perform the task, or the members will not support that person and they will impair that performance. This leads to some emotional arousal in form of tension or excitement that people experience in the presence of others. For example, maybe one student is performing guitar on stage. If the audiences are supporting him, his emotional arousal will be in form of excitement and he will perform the learned task in a more proper manner. But if the same audiences are not supporting that student to play guitar well, he will be in a emotional arousal of tension and maybe he would not be able to perform a simple learned task in a very proper manner. Similarly, it happens in organizations that when members tend to support one member's performance, then it leads to a state of excitement. If there is no support, it leads to tension and maybe the performance will be impaired. So, these are the consequences of group cohesiveness, that is social loafing and facilitation, that group member gets more power in order to support or impair each other's performance, right. We can say that group cohesiveness is a double edged sword. It is a double edged sword. Its effects can be both helpful if the group supports the organization and harmful if the group is against the organization. If the limit exceeds, it has its own consequences in form of group thinking, in form of group shift, social loafing and facilitation, right. Next comes group decision making techniques. Since we are talking about group behavior, then we have to understand that what is the process of decision making in the group, how people tend to engage themselves, how organizations engage different employees in group decision process. So, the most common form of group decision making techniques takes place are interacting groups, brainstorming and the nominal group technique. So, interacting groups, as the term implies, that it takes place in the interacting groups, member meet face to face and rely on both verbal and non-verbal interaction to communicate. The interacting groups often censor themselves and pressure individual members toward conformity of opinion, but sometimes lead to groupthink. So, this is a weak strategy basically in terms of decision making, that members regularly meet each other, and when the group is highly cohesive, they tend to pressure each other to conform to the group decision, irrespective that whether the decision making is very realistic or unrealistic, risky or easygoing. So, this sometimes tend to lead to groupthink, but this is one of the most common form of group decision making technique, that is interacting groups. The other is brainstorming. It is about encouraging people to come up with their ideas that fosters innovation and at the same time withholding criticism. They will not criticize, but they will encourage group members to come up with their ideas. To what extent the idea is weird, but still they are being encouraged to come up with their idea to be more creative and innovative. So, an idea generation process that specifically encourages any and all alternatives while withholding any criticism of those alternatives. So, brainstorming can overcome the pressures for conformity that dampen creativity by encouraging any and all alternatives while withholding criticism. So, this is something that where members are independent of each other, they have their own free will to express their ideas regarding any problem solving method or solution or creativity, because when members are free, there is no conformity to any group decision or any group thinking, and ultimately people tend to become more creative and innovative in their ideas and opinions. So, there is no pressure on the employees or the group members to experience, and ultimately they are free to give their own alternative solutions to the problem. So, in a typical brainstorming session, a half dozen to a dozen people sit around a table. The group leader will state the problem in a very clear manner, so that members can understand first of all the problem clearly. Members then free will as many alternatives as they can in a given length of time. So, here free will means that they can circulate their opinion across the table and among the members in order to support the organization and encourage members to think unusual. No criticism is allowed, even the most bizarre suggestion, and all ideas are recorded for later discussion and analysis. The idea is that when the members are free from conformity, from groupthink, that fosters creativity and innovation. Members come up with more ideas, creative ideas to bring solution or alternative solution to the problem and situation, and how the group can function effectively. And the last is nominal group technique, also it has acronym, that is NGT. A group decision method in which individual members meet face to face, but in a very systematic manner. There is no criticism, but every member is meeting face to face, in person, but they are independent of each other. They are not having any conformity pressure, there is no groupthink pressure, there is no cohesiveness. The only thing is that they are meeting in face to face interaction, but in a very limited manner. They are independent. The nominal group technique restricts discussion or interpersonal communication during the decision making process, hence that is why the term is named as nominal. That group members tend to meet they will not maintain any communication, rather they are independent of their own function and how they tend to function in that group, that a process is followed. So, group members are all physically present in a traditional committee meeting, but they operate independently, and this requires a step. It is a systematic way of group decision making. So, the first step is that before any discussion takes place, each member independently writes down ideas on the problem. They jot their ideas on piece of paper and keep it to themselves. They are not discussing with any other member. It is only up to themselves. After this silent period, each member presents one idea to the group and no discussion takes place until all ideas have been presented and recorded. So, every member gets the opportunity to present their idea before the other group members, and there is no criticism. No one is allowed to criticize any group member's idea, and every idea is recorded for further discussion. Once this silent period is also over, the third step comes. The group discusses the ideas for clarity and evaluates them. So, the management is also involved in this technique. So, management one by one tries to clarify each and every solution from the independent suggestion makers, and they try to get maximum clarity from each idea through every group member, and each group member silently and independently rank orders the ideas. The point is now that when all the ideas are collected by the management, the members itself are allowed then to rank each and every idea accordingly, that which is the best idea, and based on the ranking, the idea with the highest aggregate ranking determines the final decision. So, all the members had the opportunity to express their opinion, their ideas, and each and every person, without any interaction, the ideas will be incorporated based on the ranking. So, aggregate ranking score will actually define the decision that has been taken on behalf of the group members. So, this is how this technique is being used in group decision making. So, the chief advantage of the nominal group technique is that it permits a group to meet formally, but does not restrict independent thinking, and research generally shows that nominal groups outperform brainstorming groups. Why? Because there is no criticism, there is no cross questioning, the only focus is to collect maximum ideas from the group members and then get it ranked. That ranking will define that which decision will be most effective in future. Therefore, we can say that each group technique has its own strengths and weaknesses. For example, the choice depends on the criteria you want to emphasize and the cost benefit trade off. So, this all depends on the organization, on the management, that they would prefer to have which kind of technique in order to focus on group decision making. For instance, any interacting group is good for achieving commitment to a solution, because if that solution has been achieved through interacting groups, because the group is so cohesive, the members will be very committed to stick to that decision and ultimately perform. So, this is the advantage of any group decision through interacting group. The other advantage of brainstorming is that it develops group cohesiveness. When people come with their ideas, sometimes people become very cohesive with their ideas and they tend to implement it, which is very effective in its own way. And the nominal group technique is an efficient means for generating large number of ideas, maybe not only 1, 2, 3. That is why all the decisions or ideas are being ranked by the group members, and accordingly every solution or every idea is being implemented as per the situation. So, the point is that when we are talking about the group decision making techniques, be it interacting groups, brainstorming or nominal group technique, every technique is applicable and conducive as per the situation. The organization has to decide that which mode of group decision technique is more applicable in particular situation. So, we are through with this discussion about group decision making techniques and the extent of cohesiveness and its impact on organization in a very detailed manner. We will continue our discussion in the next class. Thank you so much.